How's it going, YouTube? So we're gonna drive my 1987 Chrysler Conquest about 130 miles back to Kansas City today. It's right behind me here. This car's been sitting roughly 2 months since I graduated from school, and everything should be working good with it. We're gonna see if we have any issues. Hopefully we don't today. It should be a smooth drive back, but I'll give you guys the backstory on this car as we get rolling. But as for now, I'll show you around the car as it sits. I'm about to start it for the first time in 2 months. All right, let's get a first start in here after 2 months of sitting. Should have a freshly charged battery, brakes, clutch, everything feels good. We got power. Let's turn the AC off. Here we go. We're on high idle here. Everything's looking good though. We've got oil pressure. We've got battery voltage. Gonna need some fuel before we make this trip. Things looking good, no leaks. Let's pull it out, put some air in the tires. All right, here she is out in the sun. Sounding good, looking good. All the tires look to have air, but I'm gonna go ahead and put some air in them just to be safe. All right, we're driving the Conquest back to Kansas City now. Going 55, 60 miles an hour, just fine. Temperatures, oil pressure, everything's looking good. Shifting good. Pretty smooth on the highway. You got some old noises, it's an old car, but trip is going smooth so far. There we are, building a little bit of boost going up the hill. Alright, so I'm about 20 minutes into my trip here. I figured I'd just fill you guys in on a little bit of the backstory of this car. So I bought this car in fall of 2022, about 3 years ago. It's a 3-owner car. I'm the 3rd owner. And a little fun fact on this car, since 1997, there are only 500 miles that have been put on this car. And the first 2 owners were very religious about keeping receipts and maintenance, even gas receipts for any trips they took. And both of those owners even went as far as to keep a log of everywhere they drove this car. So I have, there's currently 93,000 miles on this car, and I have a log for all of those miles accounted for. And so since I've owned it, I've put around 720 miles on the car, and I'll go over here in a second some of the maintenance that I've done to it. So when I first purchased this vehicle, it had been sitting outside for about 6 years. The rest of its life it had been inside garaged, and so this vehicle is pretty rust free. There's a little bit of rust pitting in the bottom of the quarter panel on the driver's side, but really there's not much rust on this car, which is great for the age that it is. But there was quite a few things mechanically that needed fixed when I got this car. So like I said, it had been sitting for 6 years, and the owner had been starting it every now and then to keep the engine fresh and from seizing up, and so that was good. But it hadn't moved, and the owner told me that it had brake and clutch issues when it was parked, and so that's kind of what we approached it with. And sure enough, the rear brakes were locked up, and we were able to kind of get them freed up, put it up on some jack stands, kind of burned them off. They're just kind of rust welded together, you know. And the car did move under its own power after sitting for 6 years, and so you know, it wasn't running the best, but there's a lot of vacuum brakes, made sure that everything was going to be somewhat roadworthy, because we were debating on taking a 130-mile trip back to Manhattan, Kansas from Lee Summit. We wanted to see if that was even going to be possible, and so we were just looking at all the major systems, the brakes, the oil, the coolant, fuel, all of those things, making sure that was going to be possible, and kind of crossed each item off the list, changed the oil, bled the brakes, made sure all the tires held air, lights somewhat worked, and made the decision that we were going to go ahead and hit the road. So over the last 3 years, I've learned a lot about this car. I've done a lot of maintenance on this car, mostly just kind of getting the mechanical things back in order, some cosmetic. I'll throw some B-roll in here to kind of show what those kind of looked like, and talk through those here. So the main thing that was wrong with this car was the clutch. The clutch was just extremely worn, and I mean it just wasn't grabbing like it should. The engagement point was way off, and we noticed pretty quick, you know, from driving it around, that anytime you'd go up a hill, it'd kind of just fall out of gear, and kind of had to play your momentum cards right. So I knew going into it that the clutch was going to be something I'd have to do. And the interesting thing with this car is they're not super common. There's not a lot of aftermarket parts or OEM parts available anymore, and so had to kind of source some parts creatively, figure out what cars might use similar parts or the same parts from Mitsubishi. And I was able to luckily find a clutch and get the flywheel resurfaced, and get the right pressure plate and all the hardware to do that job, and change the transmission fluid, and that was really pretty smooth. And then the next big problem with this car was the fuel system. The tank had a liner put in it. I don't know if that was a factory thing or somebody had done that, but that liner was starting to degrade, and it clogged the fuel system. And the secondary injector on this car, also the wiring was corroded on that secondary injector. So the car, for about a year, I just was chasing down this stumbling issue where it would just start to get into boost and then just die around 2,000 RPM. And finally traced that back to, you know, the fuel system. Part of it was the corroded wiring, which I fixed, and then I completely cleaned and refinished the fuel tank, put on the new fuel filters and a new fuel pump, flushed everything, and cleaned the top hat and the whole fuel assembly on the engine, manifold side. And so that fixed that, and this car was like woken up from the dead. It's really a fun little car. Just hearing the turbo noises, you know, it's not the fastest thing, but you can definitely have fun with it. So another big part of working on this car, I really wanted to get the mechanical things fixed before I started working on cosmetics with this car, but there was a couple of things that I just wanted to work on kind of in the meantime that would make a big difference. Number one was the wheels. These are aluminum wheels on this car, and from the factory they're turned, and so they do have a shine to them, but it's not like a mere polish. And then they're clear coated from the factory, and these wheels on this car had been sun faded, and the clear coat was peeling and yellowed on all the wheels. In some cases completely had fallen off. So I stripped the clear coat off of the wheels and went through the process of sanding and polishing these wheels, and that was a really arduous task. It took me about 4 hours per wheel on this car. So recently I've been working on polishing the paint on this car. It's a single stage paint, so just being careful with it, trying to preserve the factory paint color and paint as much as I can. It's really not in that bad a shape. It's just kind of sun faded and dulled a little bit, and that single stage paint really polishes out nice. And so really this car has been, you know, a great project to work on and get back to its OEM specifications. And that's kind of my end goal with this car, is to just make it as nice as possible. I'm really fortunate, as rare as these cars are, that this one is unmodified and it's not had anything hacked up or added to it. And you know, this car was really ahead of its time, and so a lot of the systems and functions of this car, it's been fun wanted to get those working again, and also to see what still works, and to keep this car alive on the road. So yeah, that brings us to today. We're going to bring it back to Kansas City. We're about 45 minutes into our trip here. We have about an hour and a half to go. Just taking it slow, going 65 or 70 on the highway here, and the car feels great. You know, we're running a great temp. Oil pressure is good. The battery's charged. Sounds like the door seals, I'm sure you can tell at this point, the door seals could use fixed. All right, we're here on our trip back to Kansas City, and we're just about to roll over 94,000 miles on this car. There it goes. $94,000 miles, she's still running strong in 2025. 38-year-old car. We're rolling into the west side of Kansas City now. Pretty uneventful trip all around. Car ran great. Yeah, just thought I'd check in one last time. We rolled over 94,000 miles on the way home in Lawrence. Back in Kansas City. Made the trip great, nice and smooth. Just letting her cool down a little bit with the hood open. Probably need some door seals, but overall really smooth trip.